Genesis does.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
What's up, gamers and retro fanatics? Today we're cranking up the nostalgia dial to 16 bits and diving into the legendary Sega Genesis, the console that gave us blast processing, unforgettable soundtracks, and some of the greatest games of all time. The Genesis? Sure, you might know Sonic's shoes were inspired by Michael Jackson's loafers, but what if I told you, no wait, I won't spoil it so soon. So grab your controller, dust off that console, and let's dive into the untold secrets of the Sega Genesis. And oh, if you think you're a true Sega Genesis fan, challenge yourself. How many of these facts did you already know? Drop your guesses in the comments below and let's see who earns the title of Genesis God. Alright, are you ready? Let's press start on fact number 1. The Genesis could play Sega Master System games. Well, sort of. Here's a fun term you've probably heard before. Backwards compatibility. Sure, it might sound like techno jargon to non-gamers, but for those of us in the know, it's been a huge part of gaming culture almost since day one. In case you're not familiar, backwards compatibility is when a console can play games from its older siblings. Like when an Xbox One lets you dust off those Xbox 360 and original Xbox games you haven't touched in years. Cool, right? Even though Sega's first console, the Master System, barely made a splash in North America, Sega decided the Genesis should still support those older Master System games. Forward thinking, huh? Here's the catch though. The Master System and Genesis used completely different game cartridges. So instead of building the compatibility directly into the Genesis, Sega created an add-on called the Powerbase Converter. Basically, it was an adapter that let you play Master System games on the Genesis. Not exactly a marketing masterpiece though. I mean, Powerbase Converter? That name sounds more like a spaceship part than a gaming accessory. No surprise it didn't fly off the shelves. Plus, Sega didn't really think ahead. The Powerbase Converter only worked with the original Genesis model. Once they started releasing updated versions of the console, they left the converter behind. Talk about abandoning your own accessory. Fast forward to today and the Powerbase Converter has become a collector's dream. It's rare, quirky, and a must-have for Sega enthusiasts. So if you've got one lying around, treasure it. It's like gold in the retro gaming world. The Sega Genesis had online features. These days, playing video games online is about as common as pressing an X button or flicking an analog stick. Honestly, for a lot of games, like being online isn't optional, it's a requirement. But believe it or not, there was a time when having online play was a novelty. Doesn't feel that long ago, does it? Most people think Sega's first online console was the Dreamcast, but they would be wrong. Sega's experimentation with online gaming didn't start with the Dreamcast. Oh no, they'd been tinkering with internet connectivity way earlier. All the way back in 1990 with the Sega Genesis and the Mega Modem. This nifty add-on was released for the Mega Drive in Japan and gave players access to 17 games that were exclusive to the service at the time. It might sound simple now, but for 1990, that was cutting-edge tech. Then, in 1994, Sega took things even further with the launch of the Sega Channel. This service connected the Genesis to the internet using a cable TV provider. Through it, players could access game demos, news, tips, and even exclusive full games like Mega Man: The Wily Wars. Talk about being ahead of the curve. Sonic wasn't the first packing game. Because Sonic and the Genesis became so intertwined with each other, and because millions and millions of Genesis buyers had a free Sonic game bundled in with their new system, it's easy to forget that Sega's Speedy Blue Hedgehog actually wasn't with the system from the beginning, nor was his debut adventure the first game that ever came packed in with the Genesis. With Sonic the Hedgehog not debuting until 1991, that left the Genesis Sonic-less for the first 3 years of its existence, or 2 years in North America. So what did early Genesis adopters have as their free packing game before Sonic was born? The Genesis port of Sega's popular Altered Beast arcade game actually served as the system's original freebie game. Among the other games available for the Genesis Sonic Free launch were The Revenge of Shinobi, Space Harrier 2, Golden Axe, Ghouls and Ghosts, and Super Thunder Blade. There were $100 Genesis games. We all have complained about how expensive today's games are at one time or another, but what we forget is that $60 was often a steal for a brand new video game in the early 90s, and that isn't even taking into account how much more expensive $60 was in those days when you factor in inflation. One of the things that would make one game more expensive than another was if a game had some kind of extra technology built into its cartridge, with that flexibility and room for growth being one of the few advantages to cartridges over discs. In fact, there were Genesis games that actually reached a 3-digit price tag. One of the first examples of this was groundbreaking RPG Phantasy Star 2, which retailed for $99.99 upon release. Late in the Genesis life, Sega came up with a technology similar to the SNES Super FX chip that gave the system the ability to produce rudimentary 3D polygons. The only game that ever used the impressive tech was the Genesis version of Virtua Racing. And that too debuted on store shelves for 100 big ones. Sega made official Genesis wireless controllers. Even though wireless controllers have been prevalent for much of gaming history, for the most part, wireless controllers had been the realm of third-party companies prior to the release of the Xbox 360, the first console to ever launch with wireless controllers. However, Nintendo had waded into the wireless waters several times before the Wii, first with the NES satellite base that allowed for wireless controllers on the NES, and most notably with the acclaimed Wavebird wireless controller for the GameCube. Sega, of course, bowed out of the console game long before wireless controllers became standard for consoles around the mid-2000s. But that isn't to say that it hadn't dipped its toes into them before that. Like most wireless controllers of the era, Sega's wireless Genesis controllers relied on IR rather than radio waves or Bluetooth. Obviously not the latter, as it has only just been invented and was far from mass market ready, meaning that a fairly directly line of sight with their receiver was required. For those that have used them, the consensus on Sega's wireless Genesis controller is largely positive for a wireless controller of the day, but they weren't much of a hit and Sega didn't push them for very long. And there you have it, 5 little known secrets about the Sega Genesis. Did you know them all? If so, let me know in the comments. That's it for now. I have some homework I need to knock out, but I will be back soon with more Sega fandoms. Oh, and please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you like retro gaming as much as I do. So remember to hug your mom, stay hydrated, and I shall return soon.